Hello and welcome to this episode of the Whole Health with Rob Carney podcast. Now, this is a platform to connect with and share the stories of health professionals, personal development leaders, and health entrepreneurs who are making an impact in the world. But today, we're going to be going a little bit different. I'm going to be going solo, and I'm going to be reading some passages from the book 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos by Jordan B. Peterson. So I've been reading this book for quite a while now. It's a dense book. There's a lot of great material in here. And I'm reading some sections that I really found stood out to me and made me look at my own shadow, made me be completely brutally honest with myself, because that's what I really appreciate about Jordan Peterson, is that he is so to the point, factual, no BS, and cuts through any resistance that we may have. He tells it like it is. And that's something I think we all need to hear more of nowadays, because there's increasingly high levels of censorship. We're glorifying the victim archetype, which all these have a place in society to some degree, but the balance has been shifted off. So I'm reading some sections from this book that I've found to be really impactful. So sit back, relax, you'll hear some passages, you hear my reflections, you hear some honesty, and here we go. Today I'm going to be reading a little passage for you from the book 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote for Chaos by Jordan B. Peterson. So as I was reading this the past few days, it made me really recognize, if I'm completely honest with myself, like brutally honest with myself, there's a lot of me in the past that clung to the victim archetype. And I think that's something that we're often conditioned to move towards, because the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And a lot of times if we play the victim, we're hurt, we're sick, we're whatever, people want to come to help us. And that gives us attention. That makes us feel important. So I recognize with myself in high school and even into early college, sometimes I would exaggerate injuries, and I believed it. I would convince myself to say, oh, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. Oh, I should wait. And that got me attention. But realistically, as time has gone on, the victim attention is not really something that I personally want to bring in. And I don't think anybody really wants to bring in. It's just that when we feel unworthy and we feel like we're not getting the attention, the love, the connection that we desire, sometimes we try to play the game. We play the psychological game of saying, all right, this is the kind of the lowest hanging fruit to get some attention. If I play the victim role, I'm going to get some attention. So as I'm really honest with myself, I recognize that a lot of us have, we have the victim side of us, and we also have the tyrant side of us. But it doesn't have to be one or the other. There's a spectrum. And I think that in this day and age we're living in, that it's like black, white, left, right, whatever the division is, that there's only one side and you have to pick a side, or two sides, right, to pick a side, but there's nothing in between. Well, that's not how life works. There's a spectrum of everything here. So from victim to tyrant, there's a spectrum, and we all have a little bit of that in us at all times, and that's okay. So if we can recognize that and recognize the best way to utilize this part of our human nature that is there, it's an archetype. We all have many different archetypes that we're playing, but there's a spectrum. So I want to read a section from you that has really stood out to me. I got my bag here. So this section is called Rising Up. All right. Sometimes people are bullied because they can't fight back. This can happen to people who are weaker physically than their opponents. This is one of the most common reasons for bullying experienced by children. Even the toughest of 6-year-olds is no match for someone who is 9. A lot of that power differential disappears in adulthood, however, with the rough stabilization and matching of physical size, with the exception of that pertaining to men and women, with the former typically larger and stronger, particularly in the upper body, don't get triggered, as well as the increased penalties generally applied in adulthood to those who insist on continuing with physical intimidation. But just as often, people are bullied because they won't fight back. This happens not infrequently to people who are by temperament compassionate and self-sacrificing, particularly if they are also high in negative emotion, make a lot of gratifying noises of suffering when someone sadistic confronts them. Children who cry more easily, for example, are more frequently bullied. It also happens to people who have decided for one reason or another that all forms of aggression, including even feelings of anger, are morally wrong. I have seen people with a particularly acute sensitivity to petty tyranny and over-aggressiveness, competitiveness, restrict themselves, all the emotions that might give rise to such things. Often they are people whose fathers were excessively angry and controlling. Psychological forces are never unidimensional in their value, however. And the truly appalling potential of anger and aggression to produce cruelty and mayhem is balanced by the ability of these primordial forces to push back against oppression, speak truth, and motivate resolute movement forward in times of strife, uncertainty, and danger. With their capacity for aggression straitjacketed within a too narrow morality, those who only or merely compassionate and self-sacrificing and naive and exploitable cannot call forth the genuine righteousness and appropriately self-protective anger necessary to defend themselves. If you can bite, you generally don't have to. When skillfully integrated, the ability to respond with aggression and violence decreases rather than increases the probability that actual aggression will become necessary. If you say no early in the cycle of oppression and you mean what you say, which means you state your refusal in no uncertain terms and stand behind it, then the scope for oppression on the part of the oppressor will remain properly bounded and limited. The forces of tyranny expand inexorably to fill the space made available for their existence. The whole notion of you give them an inch, they take a mile. People who refuse to muster appropriately self-protective territorial responses are laid open to exploitation as much as those who genuinely can't stand up for their own rights because of a more essential inability or a true imbalance in power. So let me kind of skim down here. No one likes to be pushed around, but people often put up with it for too long. So I get to see their resentment first as anger and then as an indication that something needs to be said, if not done, not least because honesty demands it. Then I get them to see such action as part of the force that holds tyranny at bay at a social level as much as individual. Many bureaucracies have petty authoritarians within them, generating unnecessary rules and procedures simply to express and cement power. Sounds like something that's going on right now. Such people produce powerful undercurrents of resentment around them, which, if expressed, would limit their expression of pathological power. It is in this manner that the willingness of the individual to stand up for him or herself protects everyone from the corruption of society. When naive people discover the capacity for anger within themselves, they are shocked, sometimes severely. A profound example can be found in the susceptibility of new soldiers to post-traumatic stress disorder, which often occurs because of something they watch themselves doing, rather than because of something that has happened to them. They react like monsters. They react like the monsters they can truly be in extreme battlefield conditions, and the revelation of that capacity undoes their world. And no wonder. Perhaps they assume that all of history's terrible perpetrators are people totally unlike themselves. Perhaps they are never able to see within themselves the capacity for oppression and bullying, and perhaps not their capacity for assertion and success as well. I've had clients who are terrified into literally years of daily hysterical convulsions by the sheer look of malevolence on their attacker's face. Such individuals typically come from hyper-sheltered families where nothing terrible is allowed to exist, and everything is fairyland wonderful. Kind of like these bubbles that we're putting people in with censorship. We're not showing all sides of the story, so we're trying to make it appear like everything is perfect, everything's butterfly and roses. But that we often see throughout history when people are overly sheltered, that when the reality of the world, which is not beautiful all the time, it's the middle of fall right now, things are dying. Death, rebirth is part of the life. Decomposition is part of life. Everything goes in cycles. So if we try to hide one side, if it was always sunny, if it was always daytime, there would be no night. The world would burn. We need to be exposed to both sides of the spectrum and learn to deal with that. Recognize when we're being the victim, recognize when we're being the tyrant. So anyway, I can keep rambling on that. So when the awakening occurs, once naive people recognize in themselves the seeds of evil and monstrosity and see themselves as dangerous, at least potentially, and then their fear decreases. Once we recognize that and we acknowledge the darkness within us, we don't project it outwards, sometimes our fear goes down. They develop more self-respect. Then perhaps they begin to resist oppression. They see that they have the ability to withstand because they are terrible too. They see they can and must stand up because they begin to understand how genuinely monstrous they will become otherwise, feeding on their resentment, transforming it into the most destructive of wishes. To say it again, there's very little difference between the capacity for mayhem and destruction integrated in the strength of character. This is one of the most difficult lessons of life. So owning that dark side of us. Think of the fact of aggression. This is an example I could say. Let's say that you have this you've never been taught how to defend yourself, and your village is being attacked. Think about primal times. If you don't defend yourself, your village will be wiped out. That is an appropriate time to express aggression. You are protecting something. And if people know that you have the ability to protect yourself, but you're not being aggressive in terms of going out and destroying people's lives, but you have the capability, you have that within you, people are going to be much less likely to attack you because they recognize, hey, this may not be worth it. We may lose a lot of troops if we go to attack that village. So maybe you're a loser and maybe you're not. But if you are, you don't have to continue in that mode. Maybe you just have a bad habit. Maybe you even are just a collection of bad habits. Nonetheless, even if you came from your poor posture honestly, even if you were unpopular or bullied at home or in grade school, it's not necessarily appropriate now. Circumstances change. If you slump around with the same bearing that characterizes a defeated lobster that somebody talks about earlier, how lobsters make a whole show of themselves, people will assign you a lower status. And the old counter that you share with crustaceans, also talking about how we are not so different from the most primal mammals that have been around forever. Sitting at the very base of your brain, it will assign you a low dominance number. And when we feel that way, then your brain will not produce as much serotonin, a happiness hormone. This will make you less happy, more anxious and sad, and more likely to back down when you stand up for yourself. I'm gonna skim a little bit down here. Boom, boom, boom. All right. To stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open. It means deciding to voluntarily transform the chaos of potential into realities of habitable order. It means adopting the burden of self-conscious vulnerability and accepting the end of the unconscious paradise of childhood, where finitude and morality are only dimly comprehended. Mortality. It means unwillingly undertaking the sacrifices necessary to generate a productive and meaningful reality. It means acting to please God in the ancient language. Let's keep going a little bit here. People, including yourself, will start to assume that you are competent and able, or at least they will not immediately conclude the reverse. Emboldened by the positive responses you are now receiving, you will begin to be less anxious. You will then find it easier to pay attention to the subtle social cues that people exchange when they are communicating. Your conversations will flow better with fewer awkward pauses. This will make you more likely to meet people, interact with them, and impress them. Doing so will not only genuinely increase the probability that good things will happen to you, it will also make those good things feel better when they do happen. Thus, strengthened and emboldened, you may choose to embrace being and work for its furtherance and improvement. Thus strengthened, you may be able to stand even during the illness of a loved one, even during the death of a parent, and allow others to find strength alongside you when they would otherwise be overwhelmed with despair. Thus emboldened, you will embark on the voyage of your life. Let your light shine, so to speak, on the heavenly hill and pursue your rightful destiny. Then the meaning of your life may be sufficient to keep the corrupting influence of mortal despair at bay. Then you may be able to accept the terrible burden of the world and find joy. Look for your inspiration to the victorious lobster with its 350 million years of practical wisdom. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. I'm going to jump to page 79 here. So as we start to accept these areas of ourselves and recognize that the world is not all butterflies and rainbows, which is a harsh pill to swallow, and the fact that we all have these tyrant and victim sides in us, and we recognize that, hey, those are probably in other people and in ourselves, not just in other people, and that not everybody is so different than us. They're not on the other side. They're just like us, very similar. They're just embracing the different archetypes, and a lot's only in our own perception. So, this is page 79. All right. Basically, this is talking about the people we surround ourselves with. So, talking about a new person that just joined a team that is doing exceptionally well. So the newcomer remains cynical, arrogant, and neurotic. He complains, he shirks, he misses important meetings. His low-quality work causes delays and must be redone by others. He still gets paid, however, just like his teammates. The hard workers who surround him start to feel betrayed. Why am I breaking myself into pieces, striving to finish this project, each thinks. My new team member never breaks a sweat. The same thing happens when well-meaning counselors place a delinquent teen among comparatively civilized peers. The delinquency spreads, not the stability. Going down is easier than up. And that's where I find that victim mentality, it's a lot easier to play the role of the victim and just say, oh, this is all happening to me. Poor me, the world sucks, they suck, that group sucks, that person sucks, rather than saying, hey, what can I do about it? So, and then it talks about saving people, and sometimes we do that for our own ego. Maybe you are saving someone because you're a strong, generous, well-put-together person who wants to do the right thing. But it's also possible, and perhaps more likely, that you want to draw attention to your inexhaustible reserves of compassion and goodwill. Or maybe you're saving someone because you want to convince yourself that the strength of your character is more than just a side effect of your luck and birthplace. Or maybe it's because it's easier to look virtuous when standing along someone utterly irresponsible. So a lot of times we surround ourselves with people that we want to feel better than, or we feel like are below us, so we look like the best one in the group. And that's something that David Goggins talks about a lot, is we want to surround ourselves by winners. We want to surround ourselves with people that make us better, that challenge us, that don't put us down per se, but recognize, like, they shine the light on our darkness and say, hey, this is coming up. And that allows us to work more deeply through it. All right, so an example. Your raging alcoholism makes my binge drinking appear trivial. My long serious talks about you with your failing marriage convince us both that you're doing better than you're doing everything possible, and I'm helping you to the utmost. It looks like effort, it looks like progress, but real improvement will require more from both of you. Are you sure the person crying out to be saved has not decided 1,000 times to accept his lot as pointless and worsening suffering simply because it's easier than shouldering any true responsibility? Are you enabling a delusion? Is it possible that your contempt would be more solitary than your pity? And then we're going to jump to page 88. I believe this is the last one. All right. So kind of like I was talking about earlier about the spectrum. There's not all black and white here. So, standards of better or worse are not illusionary or unnecessary. If you haven't decided that what you're doing right now is better than the alternatives, you wouldn't be doing it. The idea of a value-free choice is a contradiction in terms. Value judgments are a precondition for action. Furthermore, every activity once chosen comes with its own internal standards of accomplishment. If something can be done at all, it can be done better or worse. To do anything at all is therefore to play a game with a defined and valued end, which can always be reached more or less efficiently and elegantly. Every game comes with its chance of success and failure. Differentials in quality are omnipresent. Furthermore, if there is no better or worse, nothing would be worth doing. There would be no value at all, therefore, no meaning. Why make an effort if it doesn't improve anything? Meaning itself requires a difference between better and worse. How then can the voice of critical self-consciousness be stilled? What are the flaws in the apparently impeccable logic of its message? We might start by considering the all too black and white words themselves, success or failure. You're either success, a comprehensive singular overall good thing, or the opposite, a failure, a comprehensive singular irredeemably bad thing. The words imply no alternative and no middle ground. However, in a world as complex as ours, such generalizations Really, such failure to differentiate are a sign of naive, unsophisticated, or malevolent analysis. There are vital degrees and gradations of value obliterated by this binary system, and the consequences are not good. To begin with, there's not just one game to exceed or fail. There are many games, and more specifically, many good games. Games that match your talents, involve your productivity with other people, and sustain and even improve themselves across time. Lawyer is a good game. So is plumber, physician, carpenter, or school teacher. The world allows for many ways of being. If you don't succeed at one, you can try another. You can pick something better matched for your unique mix of strengths, weaknesses, and situation. Furthermore, if changing games does not work, you can invent a new one. I recently watched a talent show featuring a mime who taped his mouth shut and did something ridiculous with oven mitts. That was unexpected. That was residual. That was original. That seems to be working for him. It's unlikely that you're only playing one game. You have a career and friends and family and personal projects, artistic endeavors, and athletic pursuits. You might consider judging your success across all the games you play. Imagine that you're very good at some, middling at others, and terrible at the remainder. Perhaps that's how it should be. You might object, I should be winning at everything. But winning at everything might only mean you're not doing anything new or difficult. You might be winning, but you're not growing, and growing might be the most important form of winning. Should victory in the present always take precedence over trajectory across time? Finally, you may come to realize that the specifics of many of the games you're playing are so unique to you, so individual, that comparison to others is simply inappropriate. Perhaps you are overvaluing what you don't have and undervaluing what you do. There's some real utility in gratitude. It's also good protection against the dangers of victimhood and resentment. Your colleague outperforms you at work. His wife, however, is having an affair while your marriage is happy and stable. Who has it better? The celebrity you admire is a chronic drunken driver and bigot. Is his life truly preferable to yours? So, keep going on and on. This book is absolutely phenomenal. Fucking harsh truths for a lot of us. So, Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life. My closing thoughts. Let's have a little bit of compassion. Recognize that everybody is doing the best they can with the information they have. And be patient, understanding. Recognize that it's not just one side or the other. It's not just not just success and failure. It's not good and bad. It's not that group is good, this group is bad. I am part of this group and not part of that group. We're all a blend of everything. And this is something that, again, is not promoted in our mainstream narrative. And that's okay. Division sells. And we live in a capitalistic world. So until we can transcend this idea of you are completely different than I am, we will continue to be in conflict with each other. We'll continue to be in conflict within ourselves, because as we experience in here is what we project out there and what we see in the world out there. Our predominant thoughts are ultimately going to dictate the reality we live in. I've said this a million times before. You and I can be sitting in the same car looking at the same view. It's raining outside. And I can say, this sucks. I can't believe it's raining, and just start complaining about the whole situation. And you, on the other hand, can say, oh my God, this is amazing. We're in the mountains. There's a rainbow. It's raining outside. Look at the clouds. Same thing. All about our perception. I'm playing the victim, and you're playing the victor in that scenario. So I hope this helps. Hope this gives you something to chew on, something to meditate on. Definitely gave me something to think on. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm very curious from you. How do you like this format? Do you like me reading and reflecting? Do you prefer the interviews? Do you like the short format? Do you like the longer form? I like it all. I just enjoy chopping it up with cool people. I love learning. I love sharing. So very curious as to hear what you like in the format of this podcast. If you haven't already, check out all the different episodes we have available. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out, and you will get updates on all the latest podcasts, which drop every Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you're on Pacific Time, it's going to be right there, bright and early, 7 a.m. If you're on the East Coast, 10 a.m. YouTube videos I drop every Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So Monday for podcasts, Thursday for YouTube videos. Check it all out. And check out my website. I'm really revamping that up right now. WholeHealthConnects.com, where you can see some of my favorite superfood products that I use every single day. You'll see my EMF blockers with Aries Tech and much, much more. Got some cool blog posts on there. You can find all the different platforms for the podcast. So just want to invite you. Check it out. Subscribe on YouTube. Check out the website. And if you are looking for a group of like-minded people that you want to connect with, that are focused on growth, that are focused on connection, focused on community, focusing on improving our lives at a base level, focusing on holistic health, talking about hydration, nutrition, working in, Tai Chi, everything under the sun of holistic health, check out the Whole Health community. You can shoot me a message on Instagram to get more information to join for 2 weeks. But we meet every single Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for about an hour. And we connect. We share. We go into breakout rooms. We journal. We reflect. And we grow together. So I thank you again for listening. You want to tune into that, give me a holler. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on the website. Have the best day ever. We'll see you soon, fam.